You signed the contract. Now play.
Most games that you play are meant to be beaten, usually getting harder the more you progress, but you learn more tricks on how to adapt and survive. If you die to a certain enemy, each death you'll slowly learn how to beat it by analyzing its attack patterns or what its weaknesses are, giving you an opening so you can finally get that victory royale. And that's why Buckshot Roulette is so different. So many games level you up, giving your character more health, the ability to deal more damage, or the ability to skip a cutscene that goes on for way too long. But have you ever wondered what it'd be like to play a game that could actually kill you? And no, I'm not talking about those streamers that pretend that they're in a real-life car accident when they're driving 200 kilometers an hour. Have you ever experienced this visceral human drive to reach the ever-fleeting dopamine source by putting your own life on the line, not knowing the odds and having to rely mostly on random numbers and percentages? That is, unless you use an item in the game to literally cheat and find out whether the next round is live or it's going to blow you away. If the answer is yes, then you're probably a psychopath. However, if you'd like to get a similar experience without actually dying, you should definitely try Buckshot Roulette, a game that costs an astronomical $1.20. And for some reason, when I downloaded the game, it set off my Windows firewall thinking I was running a virus.
Windows protected your PC? What? Dude, I paid money for this.
As you can imagine from the name, Buckshot Roulette's main gameplay is based on Russian roulette, where an amount of live rounds is put into random chambers of a revolver. The origin of Russian roulette dates back to the short story called The Fatalist from the 1840s, where in a Cossack village, a man in a deep philosophical thought claims that there is no predestination and proposes a bet of shooting himself.
I wanna fucking kill myself.
And if the pistol fails to fire, he would aim the pistol at a service cap hanging over a window. The shot failed the first time and was successful the second time, with the shot ringing out and smoke filling the room. Grigory Alexandrovich Pechorin proved to the people around him and himself that everyone's life is their own and you control your own destiny. Anyway, Buckshot Roulette is a game where you play so badly, you actually psy up the AI into turning the gun on himself because there is no way you would make a play so horrifically stupid you gave him a free win.
Your chin should have blocked the bullet.
Ah, you're funny. No, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to fuck these donos.
The twist this game puts on regular Russian roulette is that we're not using some revolver, so unfortunately, there's no Black Ops reference here. Instead, we're using a shotgun at point-blank range, with blanks instead of empty chambers. Much like real-life Russian roulette, which I would not recommend playing, by the way, this game is incredibly short, only around 15 minutes to beat. That is, unless you're me, which took me around an hour because I was reading chat while making the decision, so I fat-fingered it and accidentally shot myself.
Wait. What? What happened? What happened? I'm not even doing a bit. What happened? What happened? What happened? What?
Just because the game is short doesn't mean it offers way more playtime, as every single playthrough will be different. This is because the entire concept of the game is based on RNG. The shells are loaded at random, the items you're given are random, meaning every pull of the trigger is extremely tense.
Lucky! Oh!
Again, unless you use that item to cheat and see what's actually loaded into the chamber, you coward. For such a short horror game, the atmosphere is amazing. Even the loading screen when you launch, it starts with a gun barrel pointed at you as the music swells. A logo the game's creator, Mike Klubnika, uses for all of his work. A single playthrough is split into 3 separate rounds of the game, each one changing up the mechanics a little bit to keep things fresh. The roulette function itself is basically everything the game has to offer. There's no secret deep lore option you can unlock by, I don't know, clicking a little bottle of normal pills in the corner. And of course, while making this video, the dev released a patch where you can now take the normal pills. I'll mention what they do a little bit later in the video. The main reason I'm actually making this video, apart from it being a trendy game that everyone on TikTok is playing, is because it led me down a rabbit hole of Mike's other games that, despite being nowhere near as popular, to me at least, are much more interesting. To even buy Buckshot Roulette, you'll have to go onto Mike's itch.io page, a platform for games like what Zika's used before his huge success with Lethal Company. Here you can find a variety of projects he made. Earlier last year, Mike released Unsorted Horror, with the description saying a collection of 5 short first-person horror games that revolve around detailed machinery and dread. The main menu shows various CDs inside cases. Turning the case over, you can read the back of them to get more information about each game before you play it, which, if anything, is a nasty subversion of the excitement you'd get as a kid, reading the back of a video game cover after you bought it, eager to stick it into your console. There's no games! There's no games on it! The first game, The Other Side, was originally released in 2022, with the description saying it's a puzzle horror game where you secretly drill through a reinforced metal wall using a janky drill. You have to repair and maintain the drill throughout the process, using tools and other pieces of equipment to pinpoint and fix any issues that occur, with one of the bullet points saying, no hand-holding. I wonder where I've heard that before. You'll notice with most of these games, the lore and setting is incredibly fragmented, with you only really being given pieces of information of what kind of world you're in.
Children #1 official Cyril Alliance. You do not talk about going outside. You do not think about going outside. This place is safe from the dangers of the outside. Out there is death, out there is nothing. I believed it was, until an explosion unfolded on the surface level. The code that gathered there, they all saw, and nobody was surprised when they were missing the next day. To keep people in the middle box, one must show power, but they forgot one person, and I saw, alright, it's time to leave.
The only thing we can gather is that we're inside some kind of underground commune and we're sick of it. Sick of being lied to and want to escape. When the game starts up, you're in a room full of drill equipment. Despite the computer terminal being in English, the door you close behind you is in Japanese, apparently saying pump room, playing into the industrial aesthetic Mike is going for with a mishmash of leftovers and reused assets. All the games in this collection feature a grimy, rusted aesthetic, something naturally uninviting. In the center of the room is a drill, and surrounding it are various supplies to keep the drill running. Oil, drill heads, a charger for the battery, and various screwdrivers to get into the parts of the drill that your fat fingers can't reach. The only guide you'll have is a computer preloaded with instructions. It'll tell you what parts of the drill need repairing, as, like everything here, the drill will break down incredibly frequently. When you do a full rotation of the drill, instead of the game ending, the computer notifies you that you've only managed to breach past the first layer of the sheet metal. This was the tutorial, warning you that trying to breach the outer layer will activate the shelter's security measures, and there's no coming back, forcing you to press the keyboard 5 times to confirm, you know, just in case you saw the imminent danger and pressed the keyboard once on accident. As soon as you accept, the drill works again, but not before power to the entire room cuts out. The emergency lights come back on, with a message telling you 5 minutes before security arrive. Nothing changes here, the mechanics are exactly the same. Repair the drill with the parts that it needs, but the added pressure of a timer, red lights, and aggressive music makes you second guess.
Somebody get me a fucking drill bit. That fucking works! Fuck!
Eating up precious seconds to escape. You need to change the oil, but to do that, you need to unscrew the top of the drill. But the screws are so small to click on, and the lights are so dim now. And don't forget to charge the battery first if you need to, because that could take longer. It is a lot to manage.
You have my consent to stamp on his head, curb stomp him in the street.
Now, apart from that, I'm sure this was designed on purpose, that when you're in the room, you might draw your eyes towards the dark hallway that you spawned in from. During the tutorial phase, I kept looking at it, thinking there'd be, you know, someone lurking around a corner. But now, with the imminent threat confirmed, I'd still spend time checking to make sure I wasn't being watched or had someone come and get me before the timer expired. If you do take too long, the game will simply end with the message,
"Nobody can leave. It's for the safety of the shelter."
But if you manage to keep on top of that rusted, pathetic drill just enough to finish the back layer, the wall collapses. Revealing a picturesque backdrop of long fields and tall trees. The music, pleasant and warming. Looking back, you can see the shelter stretching on for miles. We made it, but, I mean, come on, you know it's fake. You're playing a horror game. It's going to be a fake out. Eventually, we'll hit some kind of fake wall and realize we're, I don't know, still trapped inside the shelter. But instead, it really does look like we've made it out. We can walk far enough to touch a single tree, but on the back of it, there's a note. The rest of the note is unintelligible. Turning around again, the music has changed to the echo of a clock, a repetitive beating thud. And over the horizon, what is that? Is that a hand? A ship? It slowly reveals itself to be some kind of giant spider quickly catching up with you. It's impossible to escape. The slow speed you had carefully picking up the correct items inside the shelter is now hindering your escape. By going to the tree, you're so far away from the shelter, there's no way you'll make it back in time. But before the monster can reach you, the game cuts to its title, and then spits you back into the main menu. It really does show that as horrible as living in the shelter could have been, the powers that be really were trying to protect the population from the outside. The note you found was probably left by one of the people who managed to see the surface before they were whisked away to not instill any rebellion miles beneath the earth. Alternatively, this could just also be Mike making fun of a horror cliche. I mean, coming into an empty green field just to find a note that looks like a cut off of a Bioshock audio log, and then you get eaten by a spider that's been scaled up 2,000%. It does seem a little bit ridiculous, but as you get into the other games, it starts to make more sense. The next game is Carbon Steel. The back of the case explains that you're conducting unethical research in an underground laboratory. Booting up the game, much like The Other Side, you're given very little around the world the game is set in, but the setting could very well exist as another story in the same universe.
Channel 4. Passport. Channel 8. You.
An unseen character asks you for your papers. I'd say this could be the same universe as Papers, Please, but there's no huge queue of people behind you, and there's also no one sat with a sniper rifle ready to dome you across the map. You're only told 2 words.
Channel 1.
The next scene, you're traveling on a rusty tram. You can see the driver ahead of you, and finally seeing another human, you might actually be relieved. But you'll quickly realize there's no dialogue to exchange, and the model of the driver is completely static. Just a mess of jagged polygons, barely resembling a human. The entrance to the facility looks incredibly similar to Gordon Freeman checking into Black Mesa in the opening to Half-Life 1. It took me a minute actually to realize that to open the door, you need to look directly into the camera so someone on the other end can ID you. This is what I love about these short stories. Every interaction you have with another human feels so distant and cold. Even checking in security, they can see you through a one-way window, but you're not allowed to see them. Appearing at your new job, you'll see sparks flying, barely able to make out your new workspace. In front of you is a fully functioning computer. Inside, a single email, the date telling us that it's 1998. It greets you, saying you'll be carrying out most of the manual labor, pulling samples from the pit, and then handing it over to the research team. The total job will take 3 days. Interestingly, they call your bedroom a holding cell. Going into the holding cell, you can see a bed that looks like the cheapest affordable bed in Fallout 4, a mirror with no reflection because you didn't have ray tracing on, and a dedicated squat hole. Now, with how cramped the quarters are here, I can definitely see a lot of people drawing comparisons to Iron Lung, and that was something my chat picked up on pretty much straight away. Eventually going to bed, you carry out dreams about life outside with a blue sky. Again, making me think that this is the same universe as The Other Side. eyes. But instead of trying to break out, you're just trying to survive with whatever job you're given. Entering the main room, it's now fully lit with another email waiting for you, instructing you to raise the life form from the depths, and that you'll need to collect data from the creature, but only when it's knocked out with anesthesia, and the dose has to be precise. Going over to the chasm, you'll see instructions to begin the ascent, and above that, a logo. This logo is really important, but I'll talk more about it later. Holding down the lever, you pull up the specimen from the depths. Before it arrives, you're quickly told some details about what's inside the container: its weight, depth of where it was pulled, its class, and threat level. You'll need to use some of this data to understand how much anesthesia the monster needs to be put to sleep. As soon as the monster arrives, you can hear it scraping inside of its cage. Honestly, the audio design here is incredible because I was genuinely terrified that at any point this monster might break containment and try to kill me. There really is no hand-holding here, and I think that's intentional because for the first couple of minutes, I was walking around trying to interact with anything, hoping I could make some kind of tangible progress, all while that monster was banging on its cage. Playing into the 90s setting, using a set of floppy disks you can find next to the computer, you can actually use them to find the exact amount of chemicals needed to make the anesthetic. The monster is in an alpha class, so that'll be the alpha floppy disk. Comparing with the weight, you can find the exact amount of nitrous oxide, most commonly known as laughing gas, isoflurane, which is used to induce muscle relaxation and reduces pain sensitivity, and sevoflurane, a sweet-smelling, incredibly volatile anesthetic that has one of the fastest onsets. Either one of these alone would be enough to put a human under, but combining all three would definitely be lethal. The way you have to measure the chemicals is by holding a lever down and add the exact amount. You can't input it into a console, it's down to you by clicking the mouse and adding the exact number. If you add too much, you can always reset, but if you administer the wrong amount, even by a single number, the monster will break containment and you'll most likely be killed. Administering the right amount, the creature is put to sleep. So it's up to you to take out a glass vial to collect a sample. This violent ball of energy almost shrieking at you.
Get me to this black-ass crystal prison.
Delivering it to the research team via a small hole. Again, keeping the disconnect on purpose. With your job for the day complete, you can go back to your cell. Waking up to the next day, there's no dream of blue skies, but when you leave your containment cell, you can see that one of the monsters has already broke containment. A growing mass of flesh and eyes looking around frantically. But before you can take it all in, you wake up for real. It was just another dream, or at least you hope it was. Accessing the computer, you have another email congratulating you on your exceptional work, with the data you pulled helping the unseen research team immensely. They're especially surprised because the equipment hasn't been used in decades, almost like you weren't actually meant to make it past the first day. You now have a new item added to the lab, a surface analyzer. The creature that you pull today won't have any listed class, so it's impossible to know how much anesthetic is needed. Instead, you can use the analyzer in the opening of the cage to learn its class. When you point the gun, you can barely make out what the creature is, possibly a mass of worms writhing around inside. Putting the scanner inside, you'll have to pinpoint different layers of the worms to find out exactly what class it is. With each layer changing less from worms to abstract shapes. After doing so, you can follow the steps as before when you find the weight on a floppy disk and use that to measure the amount of anesthetic. But what you might have noticed is when taking out the scanner for the first time is that a black floppy disk falls out. Taking it and putting it into the work PC, there's a message for you. Read carefully. The contents of this disk will be erased once ejected. We haven't met yet, but I'm the engineer. I overheard a conversation from the researchers. You're in trouble. I'm working on getting you out. I've taken one of the data cells. You'll find it tomorrow marked with an X. Give it to the researchers once you're done. I won't hang around for long. It's either tomorrow or never. See you soon. The engineer wasn't lying about the floppy disk being rigged.
What?
Because if you accidentally eject it before reading the contents, you won't be able to see the message again. Now, you might be thinking, can we even trust this engineer? If anything, it's just another faceless person giving us directions. At the time of recording, I actually thought this could have been the research team trying to set me up with a test. You know, would I actually rebel? And that would be a reason to get me kicked out. But for now, all we can do is keep the instructions in mind, send the sample off to the research team, and then call it a day for a second time. No dream or fake out this time, just one final email from the research team. Again, congratulating you on your work, but warning you that the final specimen is far lower in the depths than earlier, meaning it could be incredibly violent. Thankfully, the team have left you with a fabricator to repair the cage to stop the creature from escaping. So, much like the other side, you'll now have to operate under pressure, taking all the steps you did before while trying to repair the vessel so it doesn't break, and also having to place the fabricator back onto its charging port in between uses. The music here is actually mostly diegetic, with the monster banging on the steel over and over trying to get out. The pressure you're under is great because, much like repairing the drill in the other side, any fumbles can cost you precious time, like having to remember the exact weight of the specimen, putting in the exact amounts, or even picking up the wrong floppy disk on an incredibly tight rack. This entire lab is built around precise mouse clicks, and the pressure you're under works directly against that. If you somehow manage to put the monster to sleep and send off the sample, you'll get another email from the team, thanking you for your work, but mentioning how the life forms you've gathered are less advanced than what they were hoping for, and believing that a human body would yield much more interesting results. It's obvious what's going to happen here, but before you can do anything, you hear a door open and you're tased unconscious. When you come to, you realize that you're in the cage, still human, but about to go through rigorous testing, as an unseen human puts a canister of anesthetic into the pod to knock you out. The game ends. It's a pretty morbid ending like most of these games, but if you remembered the floppy disk left by the engineer and do find that small X on one of the sample canisters, if you deliver this one instead, the ending plays out very differently. The engineer rigged the sample tube with explosives, blowing apart the lab, and all the barely functioning equipment is totally beyond repair, but it's left you with an opening. Slowly walking back to the entrance, you can see the engineer waiting for you. Much like the driver who took you here, there's no dialogue to be had, and you have no idea where you'll go next.
You've proved yourself a decisive man.
But as the screen fades out into the oncoming darkness, at least you know that you won't be waking up in a cage of carbon steel. You'll notice with a lot of Mike's games, one of the common themes, apart from the, iron lung looking rusty walls, is rebelling against authority. That's not with every single game, but it's definitely with most of them. The Other Side had you escaping the shelter. Carbon Steel had you breaking away from your employers who were basically going to use you as bait. And one of the games I'll talk about a little bit later has you directly working against the system for your own selfish gains. The next game I want to talk about is Concrete Tremor. Now, this is incredibly different to the other games, giving the description that it's a short experimental horror game about plastic explosives and Soviet apartments. What? Where the story is told from multiple perspectives. Out of all the work Mike's made, this is the least conventional horror game, in the sense that there's no spooky jump scares or loud audio stinger. But it's the game that left me thinking about it the most after the choices that I made.
I am starving.
You begin playing as someone living in a Soviet bloc apartment building, being given food from an installed unit, similar to how rations were given out to residents of City 17 in Half-Life 2. The text on purpose is too small to read, probably lists of legal jargon and ingredients. There are characters here that do actually speak for a change, but they're all voiced in text-to-speech using the SAM or Software Automatic Mouth. A program wrote by JavaScript that's been used in other games like Faith the Unholy Trinity. You know, the game that when you die, it has the funny buzzword that everyone keeps parroting?
Don't be afraid, kid. I like it.
You're then given the task to check the roof. When you do, you'll see that you and several other apartment blocks are trapped inside high walls. And beyond that is a huge network of towers rising miles high into the sky. Before you can take it all in, we hear a helicopter and then cut to their perspective.
Players on the roof. Permission to open fire. Negative. What if they jump ship? It won't be unfair. They are going to die anyway.
A telephone rings out where we cut to the perspective of the final character for this game. There's no option here. The phone will ring out forever until you pick it up.
The rules are simple. Attack soon. 25 building. 5 shots per turn. 5 consecutive missiles to the opponent phone call. First one to get lead on the opponent's building win.
The board you play on looks exactly like a game of battleships, where you have to predict where your enemy's ships are by hitting pieces of the board,
You sight my scramble ship.
with the dots marking misses and X's marking successful hits. Next to you is a sheet of all your enemy's buildings, how large they are and how many there are. This is what the people inside the apartment were talking about, the wall being the concrete trapping everyone inside the game. And looking around the room again, you'll see dozens of trays and bowls spilled across the room. This is a game that's been going on for a long time, and nothing changes until it's finished, as the only clock in the room is completely frozen. The people in the helicopter were talking about the odds of people managing to escape the apartments, getting onto the roof like you did, but they'd be dead anyway during the game. When you mark 5 points on the table, you'll hear bombing, but you won't see any of it apart from the markings of a successful hit. Possibly hundreds of lives wiped out and only being chalked up by a single X. You're purposely disconnected from all the carnage, but whoever you're up against is really good at their job, perfectly wiping out a set of buildings in every turn, almost like they're cheating. Eventually, they'll be scripted to miss every building for a single turn, which, like the rules stated, gives you a free phone call.
Who is this? Hello, I am from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
You lied to the woman on the phone, claiming to be from OSHA, a real-life administration that ensures the safety and healthful conditions for workers.
I am terribly sorry. It seems there has been a mix-up. You are not supposed to be here. You will be evacuated. Oh my god, really? Yes. I just need to know which building you were in. It's building. Thanks.
Your character played on her desperation, so she'd self-report. So now you have the knowledge of what building to bomb next. The entire exchange feels so clinical. There's no vendetta or reason why you're doing this. It's all just part of procedure. Even with the knowledge you have, it's practically impossible to beat the game the first time, because your opponent will always hit. Because apart from that one scripted time where the enemy misses, every other turn they will always hit 5 buildings. Once your last buildings are toppled, you'll get a final call. after which you have a new option: to take a revolver from a drawer and shoot yourself.
It's not over.
The trick is, the placement of your opponent's buildings never actually change. So if you reference that into your next playthrough, you'll be able to knock down all his buildings. And even though you'll get a phone call saying that you won, the ending will still be the same, with you pulling the revolver out of the drawer and again shooting yourself. Keep in mind, the back of the game case in the game selection screen specifically says there is only one ending. The disconnect between the killings is on purpose. We've all got bored of sandbox games and gone on a random murder spree, not thinking about who we're killing.
Citizens aren't supposed to have guns.
Admins aren't supposed to suck.
Some games have tried pretty pathetically to give the people you kill some kind of character to make you second guess.
You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Watch Dogs had a mechanic that would spew out randomly generated bits of information like their name, where they worked, and their salary. And The Last of Us 2 would have NPCs call out the names of people who were killed to remind you, yes, you are killing real people.
We're here to tell you about the word empathy.
But somehow, this game, with characters that have less polygons than Lara Croft's, well, you know, seem to hit so much harder when I call in that strike to have them killed.
I lost 30,000 men in the blink of an eye.
Only to then do it to myself if I win or lose. There's no telling what happens after the game. Maybe 2 new players replace us. Maybe that's the game over. But that's not the point of Concrete Tremor. It's meant to be a horrible subversion to what most people see as a pretty kid-friendly board game, despite its entire concept being killing hundreds of unseen people. The second last game on the list is Tartarus Engine. The description saying it's about a monumental computer designed for imitating eternal torment.
Let me tell you how much I've come to hate what is with this fucking inane RGB light fixtures. Fuck you.
With you playing as a technician with a group who are trying to tap into a vulnerability in the machine. Tartarus is different from the rest, as there's no real fail state, with you instead trying to understand the world that the game is set in. By the look of the environment, it could easily fall into the same Shelter from the Other Side or Carbon Steel, and it might well be. Tartarus being the infernal regions of ancient Greek mythology, the deepest region of the world, the lower part of the underworld where gods would lock up their enemies, a deep abyssal dungeon, with the opening text referencing that. As far beneath Hades as heaven is above earth. Construction began on the foundation of a great computer. Decades later, the first reality of eternal torment was imitated by the machine. The year is 2009, and the Tartarus engine was created. Time passed. To prevent workers from exploiting the machine for their personal gain, multiple protective measures were set in place. 4 technicians devise a plan and execute it into the night. There is no such thing as absolute security. If it's the same universe, this game takes place 10 years after Carbon Steel. And much like that game and even The Other Side, there's people who want to rebel against the system. There's no explanation as to why the people here created a computer based around torment. Maybe it wasn't the original intention and the supercomputer was corrupted by all the hatred around it. When you begin the game, you'll see something surprising. Humans speaking to each other. We had this in Concrete Tremor, but they were just a couple of polygons. These people actually look human, conversing with each other, smoking, checking their watches, and even having names.
You really think it worked? Yes, the network will allow us to cascade the engine in itself. After multiple layers, 1 second on Earth will translate to years in our simulation. And we can leave whenever we want to, right?
Again, though, there's no voice acting, just lines of script ran through Sam. But this is the most tangible human interactions we've seen across all of Mike's projects. They even make human mistakes, like almost fumbling their plan to breach the computer when a supervisor comes into the elevator and asks them what they're doing.
Yes, we're 3 of you are in it. 3 under our, sir. And what is it? Maintenance check.
which surprisingly was the only moment I've laughed across all of these games.
Hard drive with what? What's on it?
Going on your own to hijack into the computer, you can see how huge it is from the map, showing inmate housing, maintenance shafts, output splitters, and this is only a small part of the facility. Once you get on the tram, you can see just how vast the computer is, stretching for miles. Unscrewing the control panel, you'll use a crowbar to break into the override, uploading a virus onto the system to weaken it, and then putting in the replacement device your team have, all while under a time limit. This is something, obviously, I've already mentioned across many of Mike's games, working under pressure, but usually that's the crescendo, and then you're greeted with an ending. But instead of the game ending here, we return to our group to tell us the device is about to be calibrated, showing 4 chairs that have been configured to hijack directly into the computer. Inserting yourself into the computer, you can see what the inmates are subjected to. With the real intentions of the Tartarus engine being revealed, an incredibly intelligent supercomputer, but it's only been repurposed as a mental prison for inmates. You'll wake up inside a small metal room with potatoes being pushed through a hole and a single potato peeler, with a counter on the screen.
I just think they're neat.
Keep in mind, like your friend said, being inside the machine can feel like years, but in reality, it's only a couple of seconds. So they might be using this machine to punish inmates while not wasting any time that they could be using when put back to work. Inside the room is one of your technicians, questioning why the powers that be would create an infinitely smart supercomputer that could recreate any reality, but using its only purpose as punishment. When you're ejected out the simulation, they tell you that they're going to mess with the simulation more to speed up time. Their purpose is to hijack the original intention of the Tartarus engine and use its vast wealth of knowledge to create their own fantasy. Keep in mind, this game is set in 2009, so VR chat wasn't a thing yet.
Making a long-distance phone call.
But then, in another accidentally comedic moment, one of your friends admits that there was basically no planning into this expedition.
How long did it take you to write the code? I did not write it, I found it.
I really like how the way the game bugs out and freezes for a moment here. I'm not sure if any of you can relate, but having games brick and freeze is always terrifying, especially when playing games late at night. Some games have even directly played into this, like Batman Arkham Asylum, when you're exposed to Scarecrow's fear toxin, which is meant to show anyone's deepest fears. And this is where the game will actually pretend to crash. And when I played this for the first time, I think I was like 12 years old, it definitely terrified me. The computer starts to pull you and your friends out layer by layer inside this digital prison. Eventually, you might be pulled out and wake up in the real world with very little time passing by. But in your perception, that could be years, decades, or centuries of an infinitely repeating loop. Now, a pretty big oversight. A lot of you are probably wondering, why was no one, just sat around waiting to pull them out? But again, if you're running off code you basically found, it was never a well thought out plan anyway. The Tartarus engine is interesting because, again, like the other games that Mike's made, it is you rebelling against authority. But the reasons here are much more selfish, and because of that, you're being punished for it. An even worse fate than the prisoners, because at least they get to peel potatoes when you're just being pulled out of a simulation over and over again. Now, the final game on this list is more of a palate cleanser, Control Room Alpha. The premise seems simple enough, with you playing as a crane operator in a dodgy underground science facility. Your supervisor will show you the ropes. Oh, and by the way, I hope you didn't lie on your resume regarding the fact that you're not scared of spiders. This is the shortest of all the games, and the only one with actual voice acting, with your supervisor being voiced by Mike, the game's creator. Now, from the setup and the small control room, you'd think that this is Slavic Lung, where, you press buttons to begin the job.
Right. Okay. This is not your fault. The crane seems to be broken.
But when you press the button to begin the job, you can see multiple spiders escaping, and despite me not having arachnophobia, this still shook me up.
Nah.
You're then contacted by your supervisor how the crane works and how to retrieve samples from the pit. If you try to read the instructions, by the way, you will notice that it's all wrote in Chinese.
Fucking China.
And I'm very sure that if I even understood Chinese, it'd be completely useless. But one thing to note, the top left of the paper is a logo that's been stamped on. This is the exact same logo that was used in the lab for Carbon Steel, pretty much confirming that at least 2 of these games are in the same universe. He also tells you to be incredibly careful with handling the vessels, as each one is potentially worth 1 million Vietnamese dong, which, by the way, through conversion is around $40. Out of all the games, this is the most straightforward with no real deep lore interpretations. It's you and a lot of spiders, even having signs saying, yes, there are some big ass spiders here. But despite how straightforward the game is, it's the one with the most amount of jump scares, and ironically, scaring me the most. And now we finally get back to the main point of the video, Buckshot Roulette. Again, I hope you didn't forget about it while I went on that very brief tangent. The game itself begins with your character in the bathroom, looking only slightly better than the average crack den, with floor tiles missing and bottles of pills everywhere. If anything, it reminds me of the opening sequence of Afraid of Monsters, the mod that inspired Cry of Fear. Yep, I know that video came out 3 years ago, and I'm still gonna reference it. Already in this room, you can hear the main OST of the game, the nightclub music. It's slightly muted since it's coming out the other room, but it definitely sounds like something you'd hear in a seedy nightclub. To be fair though, the song does go kind of hard though, and makes for an immersive background soundtrack for the game. And on top of that as well, whenever you die and are revived, it actually plays at full volume. The only interaction before the game are the doors to interact with to get into the roulette room. Unlike Mike's other games, you're never given free movement here. Instead, you have to click on where to go. Interacting with the door moves you onto the catwalk leading to the game room, with perhaps the smoothest kick animation I've ever seen. Nothing of note here, just a catwalk right above a dance floor, featuring epileptic, unfriendly strobes and the same music as before, this time blaring at full volume. There's also a guy leaning on the balcony guardrails smoking, but there's no option to interact with him or even steal a ciggy, which is pretty good because smoking is bad for you.
I'm coughing as the guy.
By the look of the environment alone, you could argue that this game is also set in the same universe as Mike's other projects, having that same rusted aesthetic on all the walls, and it very well could be. But apart from the appearance alone, which if anything is more Mike's motif, there's nothing really to work with here. I've even gone through the game's files and I was unable to find that logo which he stamped across other games to connect them together. Moving through here leads you into the roulette room, once again with that crisp animation. This is where the actual game begins, starting with signing a general release of liability. Now, I've already said it's a game that when you get shot, you die. And of course, they'd need you to sign a waiver so you can't sue them if your family are sore losers about it. This is also where the game is personalized a little bit by letting you pick your own 6-letter name. Once you name yourself, you're thrown straight into the game, with an extremely friendly-looking dealer who's basically a floating head with rows of teeth. The teeth make me think of Venom, which reminds me of this totally unrelated meme that I saw on Twitter.
What if Raven team leader
had a built-in emote where she rips off her clothes and gets fucking naked?
The dealer will quickly explain the rules to you. The shotgun is loaded with shells that are either live or blanks. He loads them in a random sequence. The first round is always 3 shells, probably to ease you into the mechanics a bit. Now, to any of the math scholars watching this video, you might think that this is a simple game to win by using basic percentages. And while you can raise your chances by opening an Excel spreadsheet on the other monitor and furiously charting out every single possible arrangement of shells just to calculate probabilities, this won't actually give you a guaranteed win. And also, Jesus Christ, you're trying to metagame a $1.20 game that takes 20 minutes to beat. Again, the shells are loaded at random. That means you have a 66% chance that the first shot of the game is a blank. But somehow, every time I try to take it out on myself, it manages to be live anyway.
Let me cook now.
This is one of the biggest things about this game because it's not based on skill, it's luck. Now, this can cause some of the game to be called bullshit and not based on skill. But realistically, these are complaints from the same people that cannot deal with other players using an off-meta loadout in any FPS game.
The fucking shotguns away, pussies.
So no matter how good you are at the game, no matter how many calculations that you run, sometimes you'll have to accept that, yeah, you're going to get shot in the face. And that's all part of the experience. I am definitely not the first person to say this, but the game itself draws heavy inspiration from Inscription. A game that I said I was going to do a video on years ago until I accidentally showed my files on stream.
No.
He said something with size, right? Yep, there you go. Magnificent, it's gargantuan. The games are both similar because you're playing on a table against an opponent, with random chance being a massive factor, depending on what cards you draw or what your enemy has in their deck. Both of these games have items as well that can help you gain the advantage. Although Buckshot Roulette is a much more simplified version of Inscription, and doesn't have an ARG that Game Theory beat me to. Rest in peace, Matt Pat. Both games feature a dealer that plays by the rules. With Buckshot Roulette, you actually having to sign a waiver. These dealers never cheat. They always play by the rules. And if you lost, it's either you didn't play properly or, unfortunately, random chance kind of fucked you over. That being said, though, in Inscription, you can basically break the entire game with some card builds. That is not a thing in Buckshot Roulette. A quick side note, in Inscription, you play with cards. If you lost, all the cards got wiped. But there was one card called Ouroboros that would always regenerate with increased stats. So if you sweated the game long enough, you could basically get a card that would have 10,000 health and do 10,000 damage. Horrible, but completely allowed in the game, by the way. In Buckshot Roulette, every turn, you get two options. Shoot the dealer, although surely you wouldn't do that, right? I mean, just look at his friendly face. Or you can turn the gun on yourself. Now, I know the entire goal of the game is to avoid being shot, but hear me out. If you eat the barrel and then shoot a blank, which I'm sure that's definitely what you were going for, right? A blank round. The game doesn't skip back to the dealer and gives you another turn. And you definitely don't want to shoot a blank right before handing the gun back to the dealer, since 9 times out of 10, that means you're about to get a buckshot to the face for free. This mechanic also weaponizes your fear against you. Like I mentioned earlier, when you know you have a higher chance for a blank to be in the next shell, it's much harder to make the decision to put the gun in your own mouth. Now, I do want to say this is an incredibly immersive experience, to the point that when I actually got shot, I thought I died in real life. When you inevitably get shot, you die. But instead of the game ending, you'll be jolted awake by an unseen doctor using a defibrillator, telling you the night is still young and you need to get back out there.
You've been in a coma for 9 years.
I have no idea how a defibrillator can heal a buckshot to the head. But to be fair, if the courier from Fallout New Vegas can survive a headshot, I guess you can. By the way, the build for that game canonically is having 1 intelligence, because most of your brain is definitely missing. One thing to note as well, whoever revived you refers to the dealer as it, like it's some kind of entity or demon. And to be fair, every character we've seen, apart from the dealer, seems to be human. Meanwhile, this is just a floating head with hands, like it's Rayman or something. Despite the fact that the dealer is definitely trying to kill you, I wouldn't really call it a villain. It's your opponent, sure, but it's just playing the game that you signed the contract to. We're on the exact same rules. It really is just a dealer, like at any casino.
You up 4 in the morning playing
Buckshot Roulette.
Fucking loser.
Again, you go to a casino, you play a hand of blackjack. Wait a minute. None of you are old enough to legally gamble. Okay, let's say you're at CSGO slots and you're spinning for a knife, right? That's a better comparison. Despite the fact that the odds are definitely stacked against you and you're probably going to lose money, you made the active option to sacrifice money to try to gain something. Well, unless you're a gambling addict, then the voices in your head told you. You'll notice initially the dealer has a huge smile, but as soon as he takes 1 shotgun blast, it turns into more of an angry look. Maybe his face is so messed up because he keeps being regenerated. Anyway, there's nothing more to the first round. This is basically used as the tutorial to hype you up for when things actually get tense. You have to take your chances, and if you bet on the right shells, you win. Now, the second round onwards, we're introduced to items. You and the dealer are both given 2 items every time the shotgun has new rounds, and they completely change how you play the game, with round 2 being played on 4 charges instead of 2 to compensate their effects. In no particular order, first off, the magnifying glass, which you can use by breaking and stabbing onto the table. Through quantum entanglement and a bunch of other buzzwords, this lets you check the shotgun in the chamber by picking it up and pulling back the pump. Also worth mentioning, the animations for using the items are different for you and your dealer. While you have to pick up the shotgun and manually check the chamber, the dealer just looks through the destroyed glass, which lets him use a Minecraft X-ray hack. Which, if anything, makes me think the dealer already knows what's loaded into the shotgun. But by using the item, he's actually allowed to play like he would know what was loaded into the next chamber.
So long!
The handsaw is an item you can use to cleanly cut through the metal of the shotgun, letting you shorten its barrel. This means when the shotgun deals its next shot, it'll do double damage. Devastating if you know the next shell is a live one. You might start to realize that combining items has really good effects, because any item you use won't actually waste your turn. So you could use a magnifying glass to see if the next shell was live or not, and then once you get confirmation, saw off the barrel and use it to blow the dealer away for double damage. Also, sorry to break it to any gun nuts out there, but sawing off your shotgun actually doesn't do any more damage. If anything, it just makes the pellets spray out in a less controlled fashion. And on top of that as well, this is a pump action shotgun, so by sawing off the end, all that's going to happen is the shells are just going to fall out the tube. But again, it's also a video game, so yeah. Also, a little bit more on shotguns, because I've fired like 3 in my life, which is usually what an American fires twice a week. Shotguns in video games are actually so comedically inaccurate. You'll actually notice in real life the pellet spread of a shotgun is a lot more tight than in a video game. But that's obviously because of gameplay differences, because if you had something that could dome someone the other side of the map, it would be a little bit overpowered. Kind of like when they had frag rounds in Battlefield 3 and they realized it was so broken they nerfed it. You might have noticed that you have charges on your defib. Once they run out, that's bad because game over. But thankfully, one of the items, a pack of cigarettes, you can turn into a chain smoker. Every time you smoke a cigarette, it takes the edge off and restores a single charge. And remember, the items you and the dealer are given are completely random. So you might have a perfect strat of blowing a dealer away with a sawn-off shotgun, only for him to smoke 2 packs of Marlboros and get all of his health back. Also, I'd like to point out that the guy who actually defibs you and saves your life, he is the one smoking on the balcony. I'm sure there's some deep lore analysis here, how subversions of, things that are bad for you, like vices, are actually good in this world, but no, this is just American healthcare. The next item, the handcuffs, stop the dealer from playing for a single turn. So you're able to shoot the dealer, and if it's a blank, instead of him getting the other turn, you get another go. One thing to point out here, just like the magnifying glass, the animations are different. When the dealer puts on the handcuffs, he's used to the game, so he takes the handcuffs off you and chains himself. But when you're handcuffed, he instead forces the handcuffs on you so you can't move. Again, as unfair as the game can seem, he is playing by the rules. He's used to them. You're the one that was stupid enough to sign a waiver, basically giving your life away. The last item is beer. Once you drink it, you can pump the shotgun, ejecting whatever round is currently in the chamber. Simple to use, but it actually has quite a lot of nuance to it. It's best used when you know that there's an equal amount of live and blank shotgun rounds, as ejecting one will change the odds. But on top of that, the beer also lets you completely abuse the item system. If there's less ammo than you have beers, you can Australian your way to the last shell, which will let you know for certain if you are keeping track of what was shot and what was ejected. So now you can take a free shot and effectively re-roll your items. Because like I said earlier, every time new shotgun shells are loaded into the tube, you get more items. By the way, unspoken rule, but bonus points if the dealer has his item storage full and he gets scammed out of any new items because of your overbearing alcoholism. You can adapt this strategy to basically any combination of lives and blanks, just as long as you keep track of everything. Alright, I just mentioned running out of space items, but I mean, that won't happen too often, right? I mean, you only get 2 items per round, and both you and the dealer use them a fair bit, making it basically impossible to fill up the 8 slots you're given. But this is where we go into round 3, the final round of the game. Now, instead of just 2 items, you get 4 each time the shotgun has new rounds. Meaning, if anything, it is way easier to feed your tobacco addiction. Except this is a real fight to the death now. Even the music changes to something more tense, similar to the crescendo events in Mike's previous work. Also, on top of that, the rules have changed. Every time you've died before, you get defib back to life and are able to retry the round. But now, once you're down below 2 charges, the cables are cut, meaning you can't be defibrillated again. For someone that's a Left 4 Dead 2 expert and spam the defib, this is really bad. To compensate though, you both start out with 6 charges, but even those will be whittled down quickly with so many items in play. On top of that as well, once the defib is cut, you can't heal, because if you or the dealer tries to, the machine will just glitch out without giving you a single charge. If you die here, it really is over. You wake up outside some gates. This could be heaven, except it looks very different to what you might imagine. There's metal spikes coming out of the ground everywhere, with the entrance gate being the only interactable object. You walk through it, the camera pans through the spikes, you see some birds flying, and that's it. You're dead. I mean, what did you expect? A proper afterlife? Not when canonically God is dead in this universe. This sounds completely ridiculous, but it is pretty much clearly shown in game. On your second draw of items in round 2, you will always draw the general release of liability, just like the one you signed in the beginning, except this one is bloodied, and it's signed by God. You also can't name yourself God or Dealer when you sign the form, probably because those two forms already exist, with God and the Dealer already signing their forms respectively. So yeah, in this universe, forgery is apparently one of the biggest crimes imaginable. Now, I have seen some game theories floating around that this isn't actually God, it was more just someone with a huge ego thinking they'd win the roulette, literally calling themselves God. That could also be plausible, but when we die and go to what is supposedly the afterlife, it does seem incredibly warped and twisted, almost like it's been contaminated with something. But let's say you got the other ending. You persevered, you had that Excel spreadsheet on the other monitor, you worked out all the percentages, used all the items, and finally pushed through and dealt enough damage to the dealer where he surrenders. Keep in mind, I didn't say kill the dealer. You die, but the dealer doesn't. Instead, being replaced with a briefcase that shows you your winnings. The next scene then cuts off to you driving away in a car with the shotgun and briefcase of money. The game calculating how many shots you used, how many items, and then giving you payout based on that. I'm not sure if the dealer was even an entity or more a manifestation of a chronic gambler. Because like I said earlier, the other humans you see, they are shaped like humans. The dealer isn't. It's something much more powerful than that. When you get handcuffed, you're handcuffed to a bar on the table, but the dealer handcuffs its hands, and when it's done, it breaks them. And when you saw off the end of the shotgun to do more damage, it takes you a couple of minutes to get through all that metal. But with the dealer, it does it instantly. Like a knife through butter. Like I said earlier, the dealer never outright cheats. It still plays all the rules that you do, and it even makes human mistakes, like shooting itself in the head, thinking that it was a blank round. When you do, quote-unquote, kill the dealer, just before the briefcase of money appears, you see two glowing red eyes. He is definitely not dead and just waiting for someone else to walk into the room and sign another waiver. There's also a chance that none of this ever happened and you were deep in a coma because of the defibrillator units being used to resuscitate you, blood transfusions, but that would also mean this goes into the realm of all-in-the-head game, and I'm not doing that for the 7th time in a row, so I'm going to completely ignore that theory. But it is interesting to see that many of the items you use are based on some kind of addiction, with drinking and smoking being incredibly common, popular, and dangerous vices. If you complete the game flawlessly, you'll get $70,000, and that's it. It's just a number that appears on the screen. It means nothing. I mean, there's no Valorant item shop to buy any cosmetics.
Fucking gay-ass fairy bullshit.
It is literally an arbitrary number that means absolutely nothing. I mean, you could probably brag about it to your friends or on a YouTube short, but that's it. There's no secret developer message, no secret ending.
Don't scare us no more. Batman Fortnite.
Just the fact that you know you've beaten the game, but again, you're going to come back. If you remember the pills I mentioned earlier, you can actually take them now thanks to a recent update. You're given the double or nothing mode, which basically skips all the dialogue, randomizes stuff like shells and item counts, and just respawns you instantly if you die. You can also continue playing in a sort of endless mode after getting the cash, letting you multiply it when you keep winning. If anything, it adds another layer of replayability to the game for the people who wanted, you know, something beyond just the base game. I think one of the reasons Buckshot Roulette became so popular is because no matter how good you get at the game, you are still playing on random chance, and ironically, the better you play at the game, the worse the percentages come out for you, to the point that to get a no-hit run, you're basically trying to play the lottery. Myself, I've never actually played the lottery, but I saw a video of iDubbbz talking about it one time, and he said it was kind of bad.
Really, it's a lot more shameful if someone finds out that you play the lottery rather than they find out that you're a furry.
Now, personally, even though there is no direct link, I do think that Buckshot Roulette is set in the same universe. This could be a game that takes place inside the shelter. Let's say that the majority of games that we've covered today are all interconnected. We know that there's a shelter that humanity takes refuge in. It's ran by an authority figure, powers that be, that rule with an iron fist. We know that there's people that try to escape the bunker because of how depraved it is. This game could be an offshoot of that depravity, that boredom, being stuck underground for who knows how many years. People got bored, they got desperate. That's why when you go onto the balcony, you can hear disco music. That's a party that could be going on for days days, weeks. And also the room you walk into, people are basically playing with their life for entertainment. When you get the quote-unquote good ending of Buckshot Roulette, you're in the car driving away with all your earnings, but when you look outside the window, you'll see wooden fences and then what appears to be a motorway, but in the distance, it's completely black. There's nothing there. Not even any visible streetlights. We really don't know the expanse of the shelter. In the other side, we were only operating on the surface level, and when we get outside and look behind us, we can see that this facility stretches on for miles. If the Tartarus engine is also in the same universe, which it could be because the silhouettes of the Tartarus engine characters and the character you see smoking on the balcony are pretty much identical, that would make sense as to why such a brutal game would be allowed. I mean, keep in mind, in Tartarus, you were playing as engineers that were trying to hijack a master computer just to escape reality because it was that insufferable. In these games that Mike has made, there is some sense of society, some sense of civilization, but it also has decayed incredibly over time, to the point where brutalist entertainment is really one of the few things left. Let's say you got the best ending, you got the $70,000 and you escaped. What are you really going to do with $70,000 in a shelter full of people that are basically miserable anyway? And what we learned from the other side, if you manage to escape to the surface, it's not much better there. If anything, in the other side, you might be playing as the same character. He might have won an astronomical amount of money, but he's still unhappy with the world he lives in, so he tries to escape and gets punished for it. One thing I've noticed playing through all of Mike's games, the ending is always a punishment. In the other side, you were chased by a monster that you can't even comprehend. In Concrete Tremor, the game was complete, and whether you won or lost, you had to take your life so someone could take your place. And Tartarus engine, you were stuck in an inescapable hell that could last decades. And there was also that one with the spiders, but that was kind of a joke game. Now, I do want to point out there are other games that Mike has made, for example, Unsorted VHS, which was a collection of short puzzle horror games. But the reason why I didn't cover them is because I feel that Unsorted Horror taps into the story of Buckshot Roulette a lot more than those games. Much like Iron Lung, there definitely is some kind of expanded universe here that I really hope that Mike expands upon. So apart from that, what's my main takeaway? Vars from Far Cry 3. He was totally right.
Pull the trigger! Let's go shoot me! Let's go shoot me! Shoot me!
I'm going to shoot you with this gun. I am going to blow your brains out.